must redo it. No one's going to give it to you. You must reclaim it. And if you don't reclaim it, logically, someone who's living off your virtues is not going to say, well, this is what you do. And you shouldn't expect it. Not that it wouldn't be morally correct or ethically correct. It would be, could be. But since they're colonists, colonists have a mission, don't they? And I think the mission of a colonist is that which a leech is in dirty water, a colonist is in the political arena. His mission is to suck your essence. Why? That's where they get their nourishment from. We call it slavery. Scientists call it bloodsucking. Essence draining. Do you understand? So, what are we talking about fixing it? So, we have a covenant with Allah, with nature herself, that we have violated. Part of it is that we have agreed to the papal principles of disrespect for womanhood. The one who brings us all here. And that includes us, not a man thing. That's women that disrespected their role in society. Not what he said their role is, what they know their role is in nature. That is to nourish, nurture, cultivate civilization with knowledge, not with emotions. However, she lost knowledge because we've been held to servitude. So therefore, it is responsible for us to do what? To seek knowledge. And to embrace knowledge, not to fear knowledge. And to apply the wisdom that it brings. To do what? To build. Because when you build with things that are solid and not illusionary, they have a tendency to stay longer, don't they? I think so. Are you following me? Now with the sister with the child, not understanding that birth certificates are bonds, and most people not knowing that they are, usually will approach them with a position of a sense of security or civic duty that, oh, I filed the papers and cool. You know, and it's on file, like it's on file for the record. Not knowing that it's on file for bond against the child and the mother. Because the condition, politically, the condition of the children are the condition of the mother, according to the Christian black codes. And so, irregardless of the condition or the status of the father, the condition of the mother is considered first. All right? So whatever her status is politically, that is what the corporate state will assure, if they have any hand in it, that the children will be. And so if they have the woman in servitude, the children are slaves. That's why it's important that they file that birth certificate in the county record under corporate auspices so they can place their debt and debts in the world against that bond. But then, for the return of service under feudal law, the nomen, which is a phonicism that's on there, refers to what you think is a person because it sounds like their name, but it is not their name. It is back to the man of straw that they created, just like you create a corporation. It's a fiction. But then when they call the debt, they go and get the body that they claim is attached to it, and when the body does not rebuke it, the bond carries as law. Then they sue you.
Islam, Brother Todd. Could you elaborate for the sake of those of us here who are probably not familiar with how, when we go down and we get married in front of this agent of the state, how we have signed over ourselves and all of our progeny to the state?
And see, and this is the deal, is while you have done it, it is unclean. Because it's not conscious that you do it. Now, and this is, and when you see the sister or brother, make sure they know this. The marriage certificate, particularly in the corporate state of New Jersey, and it would be likewise in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the other corporate states, though they may use different title numbers, comes absolutely, in every respect, absolutely under police powers, Title 37. All right? Now, the state agent's job, which is an overseer, is to convince the slaves that he was sent from God, the Creator God, to bring them together in holy union. The people don't know that they're operating for the Holy Roman Empire, who ordained them, right? And gives them a fee for keeping the niggers from getting restless, which is designated European family property, right? And when they unite them, it is a contract with the corporation that all issue from the womb of the mother automatically becomes ward, W-A-R-D, write that down, look it up in the law book, of the state. Wards of the state, which is a nice way of saying dependent slave of the state. It's because they say slave, then you get pissed and you want to fight.
Military.
So they used to say ward of the state and you're happy, because you don't read anyway. And so, you know, that's how they take it. So they already know we're not going to, most of us, not going to figure it out. And so the wardship status and the filing goes on while we process every day and we're busy sporting and playing. And they're filing liens against us constantly. Which, of course, you know is why under auspices, because they have debts against these certificates on these living beings that are listed as chattel. That's why they will get you if you hit their property. They come in the middle of the night, kick your door down and take their property out. And you can tell them, they're my children. Corporate, don't even list them as, that's their corporate property. And usually has their name on it. And you have no standing in law to make any argument. However, we're usually looking at it from a moral and ethical position, like there really are, like we've been ethical, as if we've honored our mothers and fathers. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes.
Meanwhile, while the ignorance is perpetrated by the state agents who say that there's a separation of church and state, but they're really state agents, overseers, who just sold us to the state, and we agreed, so now they got that marriage certificate, so it's a bond. And they put a bond on that too, just like they do with certain persons. That's why they don't want you to take them babies out of the hospital, you understand? And they would say, let me give you a social security number, let me give you the name, give us the name, give us the name, give us the name. And they say, well, we're not going to give you the baby. And you be arguing with them, because they're going to file bonds against that child. See, but if you know that, you're not going to argue with them, you're going to prepare yourself communal-wise, and in your consciousness of how to deal with it. Now you understand the filing of your own documents in your indigenous or aboriginal status. Whether you do it in an organized manner or whether you do it individually, now you understand it. Because guess what if you don't? They're going to file a bond on it. That is routine. That's what bureaucratic slavery is. Like, for instance, like, our people will admit that slavery's been bureaucratized, but challenge them to name it and they can't. They'll just stick with the emotions and talk about racism and talk about unfair, but they can't specifically go to the law. That's why it's important for you to understand what is specifically done so you can specifically counter it. Back to point again. Now do you understand again why Noble Drawley set up the nationalization process? How it ties in politically to take the natural being out of the corporate jurisdiction that the European Dutch masters created in corporate status under the straw man to steal your essence under suits on ever-living bonds. And those bonds are passed down to their offspring, just like any other inherited property. So slaves are inherited. This is why this thing has been perpetrated from generation to generation. Not because nobody likes you or don't like your complexion. They got bonds on you. You got to send Susie's child to college while yours don't go. That's it. Again, you understand the nationalization process and why it was set in place. Now it makes sense to you, doesn't it? Not that it didn't before, but it becomes clearer because it's a political act, for the record, to remove you from the artificial person jurisdiction created by European colonists to bureaucratize slavery. Now, hear this again. And remember this, and tie all this back to woman. Keep this in mind, and I'm going to go back to where I left off. Women run all these all the institutions, don't they? Hospitals, who's the majority run them? Women. Churches, who's the majority run them? Women. Mosques, synagogues, who's the majority run them? Schools, who's the majority run them? Nurses, who's the majority nurses? Huh? Little clubs, stuff going in the community, who's the majority run them? Raising your children, who the majority runs it? How come we have so many women with children that are struggling to survive, that's living in poverty? Does that sound religious to you? Yes, it is religious. It's what they've been getting called religion, which is a fraud. And no one has the guts to tell the truth about what's going on, because they're usually part of that hypocrisy. And then accusing Jesus, Allah, and Moses of that crap. Prophet Muhammad. It has nothing to, it has no association with Allah whatsoever. None of that crap. However, if you tell that truth, Muslim people want to lynch you. But the conditions out there tells you what the truth is. But because they're hypocrites, they won't deal with it. But they always talk about solving problems. Until you are willing to deal with the truth, you're not solving anything. Now, let's go back to mothers. So if you stop supporting institutions that don't support you, and if they don't support you, they can't support me, because I'm your husband, your boyfriend, your brother, and your son, no matter what my age. We just get bigger, but we do stay boys. You understand? And how can we protect you if you support the institutions that take us from you? Because you make them all run. But part of it is because you're subjugated and you figure, well, if you don't, you can't take care of your family. That they've broken up already. You halfway trying to survive now. You see it's a catch-22? Not exactly, it just appears that way. Do you understand? So you've got to look at this thing the same way the DAR did. The same way the DAR set up the isolation codes that set up the Knights of Columbus, Ku Klux Klan, white community, etc., and overthrew the Moorish Empire, is the same way you got to take it back. Starting with never, and teach this to every woman that you know, give your child a European name. If you do, you're sealing their fate for a lot of crap that you don't know getting ready to come down the pike. Do not let your child come here and take a breath of air on this earth and give that child a European name. And if somebody have tagged you with it, you give them a free national name anyway. So they don't have a bond on a free national name, because then internationally they are subject to international law and they can't operate with the straw man using an Asiatic name. They have to have a European name. That's why they always ask you, what is your Christian name? I mean, what name did the Christians put on you through your grandmother that they enslaved? Because that's the bond name. It's a wardship name. It is never your name. That is no different than a number or a mark for an account against you for their benefit. And that's what is used. So you want to look at mothers. When you get in organizations with other women and you start talking about community problems, you're going to talk about women coming together and dealing organizationally with fundamental principles of structuring forms and dealing with birth record forms coming from you and no longer using the corporate state forms. And talking about the subject matters of how to do it. That's what you should be discussing, not how to march. Because anything that you seek, you will find. Meaning that all things will not be said at this time, but I will tell you enough that you can become operative. Islam.
Well, I guess you would have answered my question. I was going to ask, how would one go about filing the proper documentation?
The first thing that you do, let me give you another instance. so that you can have an idea of how to start fixing things. Not that other people aren't doing this, because other people are working to fix things too. When Nobrali set up the old Canaanite temple, the Moor Science Temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, etc., Great Seal, Moorish Divine National Movement of the World, etc., they are actually outposts or regent. They are regencies. They are regent branches of government. It was supposed to be done within these orders. It was not done. Does not mean that it cannot be done. It was not done, and so you would think in your mind, what do we do? It was done. It was corrupted. That's all. Do you understand? In other words, it was a social political platform that was incorporated within this government to redeem you, socially, politically, economically, industrially. Do you understand? And teach those things necessary to make you better citizens. However, that it had not been done has given people a wrong concept of the movement itself. And so people would view it as a religious sect, not knowing it has everything to do with their birthright and has nothing at all to do with what they believe or don't believe. They can be atheists and they're still Moors. And that birthright still belongs to them. But because it wasn't presented to them properly, they have a misunderstanding and they agree to give up their birthright because they think they're protecting their beliefs. You see the problem? This is what the European has lived on and depended on and has been secure with. And only you can reclaim the Holy Grail. Only you. He may possess it. It is not his. And he does not have the strength to keep it as it appears that he does, because he has no power except what you give him.
Absolutely.
So you agree to that jurisdiction, and he claims it, and files against you on it. But you need to know, outside of emotions, but by fact of due processes of law and color of law, how it is done so that you yourself, even without the assistance of someone that knows legal processes, can do it, because law is based in common sense. Did you know that? Now people say, yeah, but I don't understand law. Did you know law is based in common sense? That's why it's called common law.
Yes.
It does not abridge your common senses. And if it does, it's usually color. Now you understand why they call us colored people? And our people thought it meant complexion, didn't they? It means faking people. Faking like they're human. The issue in the battle, brother, we're going to talk on 2 points here. That's dealing with the world's problems, is the problem of the blending of the nigger and the human. It was not done for the purpose of creating a problem. It was done for the purpose of solving a problem. However, when you mess with nature, problems come. You just got to deal with them. When the Albo declared themselves God, it kind of put a crimp in the gears. You get the point? Anything that thinks and anything that lives wants to live.
Explain what is the nigger.
The nigger is the people that the people read about in the books called Romans and Europeans. The ignorant call them white men. As a matter of fact, most of the ignorant think that they themselves are niggers, which they are not. The ignorant think that nigger is some nation in Africa, Kemet on the other side. Civilized world knows that they're uncivilized, which is why they believe that fiction. Because the niggers told them that and traded places with them and have their seat of power. Stole their birthright. So the humans think they're niggers, and the niggers are claiming to be white people, which is a status, not a complexion. Are we clear again? That's the complexity of the political social arena that they're dealing with, which is why the humans have difficulty solving their social, economic, spiritual problems. Because their concepts about what's going on is wrong. And if you talk to most of them, they will start telling you what their beliefs are. Very few will start giving you facts, knowledge, scientific data. They don't have it. They don't deal with such matters. It's above them, or below them, or something. But they don't believe that, so they don't deal with facts. They just deal with emotions. And everybody else makes money off them, lives off them, but they're saved though. You see the problem? Huh? They're destroyed for lack of knowledge, but they think their beliefs is equal to knowledge. See what the problem is? Getting over that mountain with them? This is what makes it difficult for other Asiatics and Africans from other parts of the world to come help civilize these people and get them out of this nigger problem that they themselves keep perpetrating on the civilized world. Because they're believers. They won't grow up. Refuse to grow up. Refuse to give back to them Romans that which is theirs, that Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. So they want to keep Caesar's game, but they don't want Caesar to oppress them. Well, guess what? They don't exactly go together like that. They don't want to honor their mothers and fathers, that's their business. But they have no right to talk about rights, because rights don't exist with such beings. You understand? Now, back to make it very clear. Negro Yavera Arebo, troglodyte nigger, is the black chimpanzee monkey. Those are the scientific names for that anthropoid, which proliferates near mostly the Amazon River and Rio Negro, Manaus, United States of America, Brazil. It is that anthropoid which the ancient Moabites, dealing with technology in the Pyramid of the Sun in the Yucatan, Mexico, and did the experiments in Patagonia, which is Argentina, that brought about that hybrid that you call Romans, or the ruddy blonde, that ignorant people call white man, who is not indigenous to the planet, which is why they have difficulty living under the sun, which seeks to kill them. Are we clear? They have no land, except we assented Albion to them, which is called Land of the Angles, England. Now you understand what Anglican church is? Anglo-Saxon? All right. Do you understand? Now they were first near the equator, but because the sun was killing them at such a large rate, we gathered together the blue eyes that you hear in the Holy Quran, and we gathered up all the blue eyes. That's it. We gathered them up and took them to the island of the fog, or Patmos, the land of the angles, and placed their lepers behind the rock until their lesions were all white. Do you understand? Now you understand the, how would you say, the tradition of the myth about the leprechauns? Now you understand St. Patrick's Day, Tag Day, running the Moors out of Ireland?
Black snakes.
Oh, four-leaf clover, the zodiac, four corners, the four gates. Mummers Parade right here in Philadelphia, 32-degree masonry. Two fingers across the lip like this. Mum is the word. And they would paint their face in blackface. And they'd march from 6th and Moor Street, South Philadelphia in the South Gate, and they'd go north to the North Gate, past the battleground where City Hall sits, and if you look at that building, look at the architecture, it's Moorish architecture. And then the parade would end at number 1, northeast corner, Broad Street, the Masonic Hall, Masonic Lodge. See how they tell you to your face, but they know you won't pick it up? Do you understand? Huh? It's not hidden, it's in your face, but they know you don't pay attention to things. And then they put your sovereign seal right on the dollar bill, that great Trinity pyramid, and no one speaks under it. but it is the Great Seal. And if you turn it upside down, the shadow will make a 7. 7 seal. Take that dollar bill and turn it upside down and watch the shadow. You notice that the shadow goes underneath the pyramid too? And then it comes up to that acacia bush and you turn it upside down and it's a 7. Circle 7. That's the 7th seal. Right in your face. All Masons know it. All Jesuits know it. All Knights of Columbus know it. All Knights Templars know it. All Camellia know it. Everybody know it, but those who lost their birthright. Because they think they Negro, Black, and Colored, whatever they are next year, this year, next month, tomorrow. 2 hours from now, whatever. You see it, but you can't tell them nothing because they're saved. But the babies are dying. But they saved though. Do you understand the problem? So therefore, the information must be given in a way that they can comprehend it, in a way that they can use it, that they can function with it, actually, to demonstrate, so they can take strength in it and reclaim their birthright, because no one can do it for them. You can only claim your own sovereignty. No one can make you honor your mothers and your fathers. They can tell you anything. You know, do what you want to do. You got free will. Whosoever will. You don't want it, that's fine, but don't complain. That's all. Just sit back, be a good nigger, and pay them Romans those tithes. It's called Roman tax. That's what tithes are. Ain't got nothing to do with the prophets. That's Valerius, the Roman emperor, who founded the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, which is called in these days Christianity. And it had nothing to do with the Nazarene at all. Period. The murderers of the Nazarene made their political creed and tagged the Nazarene's name to it, altered his name, and the world has been following the Romans ever since. I'm talking about, the devil did this. Yeah, right? They did to themselves. That's why the rest of the civilized world don't feel sorry for us. That's why they won't come and tell you these things. Because usually if they tell them the truth, we want to fight them. We'll burn their house down and stuff. We're talking about, I hope your children go down on 295 at lunchtime and play. Because you ain't saved. I don't know if I can talk to you. And so they just set up shop like everybody else, put a glass between them and these savages, and live good like every other civilized human being. Then we get jealous instead of studying and learning. And tell me it's not true. It's true. It's true. Anyway, back to Purah. The area of land that's called India is Purah. The Moors named it Hindustan. That's where the name Hindi came from, Indian came from, which is why you will find in Colombo's, that's Cristofero Colombo's, not Christopher Columbus. Cristofero Colombo's records, ship logs, that when they came here to the Atlantis Islands, the area that you call Dominica, etc., etc., that they found the same people they found in Hindi. And they called them Hindis. Voodoos, Indians. Indians and Moors are written in history as one and the same, interchangeable. So once you get past 1800, you'll see Indian, Moor, and African used synonymously. Not those people and then the other people, synonymously. It is not until later when they were reconstructing history that they start separating and dividing them, confusing you so that you would not know your social, political tie and authority in the land that your feet are resting upon. And by you denying it, he claims it. And by you using his name, he claims your possession through you using his name, because name denotes possession. That's why they put the European family names on the fallen Moors. For political, corporate reasons, not because they weren't being nice guys. Are we clear? So, this is back to what I was saying to you before. The term Indian, used, designated to the tribes here, come from that false, or you can call it a misassumption, it wasn't exactly that. But I predicated on Colombo's ship logs, when he called the people the same people he saw in Hindustan. So the Indians, they're just like them. They couldn't even make a distinction.
Turned out to be even better. We've all talked about the Constitution and this country being founded on it. My problem is when I start talking about it, I get very upset. So forgive me, this will pass. There has been perpetrated upon us the most heinous crime against humanity, and it goes so far back that you can't blame any of the administration because they are not a government. They are the United States Corporation. The U.S. government incorporated as a for-profit commercial enterprise in the Legislative Act of February 21st, 1871, 41st Congress, Session 3, Chapter 62, page 419, and chartered a federal company entitled United States, i.e., United States, aka U.S. Incorporated, a commercial agency originally designated as Washington, D.C., in accordance with the so-called 14th Amendment, which the records indicate was never ratified. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to the state. 19 Corpus Juris Secundum 541, location of United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico was appointed receiver over the bankrupt United States in the Reorganization Plan number 26 in 1950. Title 5, United States Code, Section 903, Public Law 94-564. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico, Title 27, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 251.11, the title, Secretary of the Treasury, is a euphemistic abbreviation of the actual title, Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. The Internal Revenue Service was incorporated in Delaware, is not a part of the supposed U.S. government, which is but a de facto for-profit corporation masquerading as a government. It operates out of Puerto Rico. This is the IRS. It's not registered to do business in any state, is the bookkeeping and debt collection arm of the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. They collect for the International Monetary Fund. Everybody who gets up into the administration, the Congress, the legislation, all the way down to the local level are corporations, private companies. We are their chattel. We are their inventory. They make money off of us, and you don't even know how deep it goes. And I apologize for my passion about this. But when I found this out, it was the only time that I felt hatred for the evil slime who did this to us. They go so far as to trick us that, have you ever been to court and the judge says, do you understand? Don't ever say you do. Say, no, Your Honor, I do not understand. That simple little word doesn't mean what you think it does. You have just given him permission, if you say, yes, I do understand, that you're going to stand under whatever he wants to lay on top of you. The courts are admiralty courts. The judges, the attorneys, all belong to the Bar Association. It's still a little bit vague as to what bar stands for, but we do know the first word is for British. Some people say accredited, some say attorney, and a registry. They do not work for us, we the people. We the people are working for them. We don't need a gold standard. We are the value to the Federal Reserve note. We can give value to our United States currency. The Constitution that they're teaching today, as wonderful as it is to learn about a big portion of it, it's not the correct Constitution. It's actually a second Constitution, and that's the one that they wrote when they went incorporated. In 1933, there was the Emergency Banking Act. You've got the War Powers Act, Trading with Enemies Act, and every year, the United States Corporation, masquerading as our supposed government, which is no more than elected officials like a CEO and the stockholders board for AT&T or Microsoft. So you're not voting for a legislation. You're not voting for a representative because each and every one of them are bonded under a United States corporation. There's 37,000 subsidiaries of that corporation. Every agency, when you look it up on Dun & Bradstreet, is listed as a corporation. It is a for-profit private company, and we are their inventory. I feel bad knowing that I've been enslaved all this time, and I'm sorry for the people during the civil rights, all the wonderful ones who were already in slavery and they thought they were freed. We've all been in this boat together, and people need to really wake up, and we need to hold these corporate officials' feet to the fire and insist the corporation must be dissolved, the Federal Reserve must be banned from this country, and we must turn our system of judiciary back to a common law. If there's no harm, no loss, there's no crime. And everything else is a way to get you to pay. Even the court systems are hooked up to the QSIP system. When you get a case number on a court document and you're being charged with something, why do you think they call it a bill or being charged? Because that's exactly what's happening. They set that court number up, and it's attached to the stock exchange too. And from the moment you're arrested or charged, they start trading you on the stock market, swapping you just like they were with the derivatives and the default swaps on the mortgage. And that's a whole nother thing. We all know that's coming out in the mainstream media. Federal Reserve is meeting on November 2nd, the same day as elections. All I can say is wait for the sky to fall, because they know their house of cards is tumbling in on top of them. And if I do nothing but go to my grave, I will see them pay for their evil that they have committed, not only against our nation, but every nation out there. It's been an illusion, and every person who gets up, even Jan Brewer, Trent Franks, I don't care who they are, they know their position. They know they've been lying to you. Why do you think they have such a disregard for the Constitution? A Constitution. They know that they're doing as they damn well please, because as an employee of a company, can you go tell the boss how to run his company? Do you think he's going to change because of you? And when you add this all up and you think back to, especially lately, it's rolling over so quickly on itself. So when you go to the polls, I'm going to the polls, but I'm writing in the name of Jesus Christ, because there's no one, I will not vote for the lesser of evil, because evil is evil. And I hope that someday we'll all be able to have real elections with a de jure government, a de jure constitution, and a common law of the land. I've got a few extra DVDs of a video called Secret of Oz. It explains the money situation very well. We don't have to have a gold standard. North Dakota has a state-owned, state-chartered bank. They do not deal with the Federal Reserve. They haven't since 1909. They have a 3.2 unemployment rate right now, and they have a $600,000 surplus, and they're just rolling along like roses. They didn't suffer during the TARP, the bailout, and all of this. They don't have a foreclosure rate. So let's open our eyes and see what one state held their feet to the fire and didn't give in to the Federal Reserve. Like I said, I've got a few extra copies of that DVD. It's even an excellent education for children. It did have, the man who wrote The Secret of Oz did have a little bit of disclosure in there as to what was coming, but they changed it when they made the movie. And I have a few cards. There's the organization website, StopTheFraud2010.com, and the United States de jure government.com. And I'm going to, we have Sheriff Mack on board. We have the GO organization, several tea parties throughout the nation, and they're on a nationwide movement to have a teleconferencing call with every sheriff in every county of this country. That's 3,100 plus sheriffs on a teleconferencing call. That's going to be
just don't
planned
say
for
anything
next
about
year.
where you got it, though.
But I think if we take organizations like Western States and bring them together with all the others, and we march down this better path of de jure government, that's the way we need to do this. We can't fix evil, and we can't fix the corporation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to Whoever You Thought You Were, You're a Jew, the TV show that teaches the ignored truths of history. We also teach this concept over here, and we try to get away from this one, the golden calf. Today's show is called Race, and I can't think of a subject where the expression the ignored truths of history is more apt than this one. When we talk about race, we're talking about that group of people that white people sometimes call niggers. I wonder how many of you actually know what that word means. You will by the end of this show. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks once had a great culture which exceeded the culture of whites, you'd probably find that pretty incredible. But we're talking about the ignored truths of history. Those of you who've been watching this show may perhaps recall that several weeks ago we talked about the fact that most of the Jews alive in the world today may actually be descendants of Russian converts. Now, Jews like to consider themselves to be descendants of Israel. So the fact that Russia was once a Jewish nation for 500 years, in fact, and that most Jews who are alive today may be more closely descended from Attila the Hun than from King Solomon, these are facts which are just glaring facts, and it's incredible that such things could be ignored. And the question of how such things could be ignored has an answer, and the answer is collusion. All the parties involved have silently agreed, even perhaps without ever talking to each other, they've silently agreed to just not discuss this subject. In the case of the Russian Khazar Jews, it's embarrassing and frightening to Jews to consider the possibility that they may actually be descendants of converts and may have very little Israeli blood in them. In the case of the Russians, it's a horrendous embarrassment to them to admit that for 500 years in the Middle Ages, Russia was a Jewish nation. So they just ignore it. It's collusion. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks, for as many centuries as whites have been superior, if you want, in the Western world, that for just as many centuries blacks were superior, you'd probably find that hard to believe. And you'd wonder how such a fact could be hidden. And the answer is, again, collusion. The whites wouldn't want to admit such a thing, because whites like to feel superior and like to think that their superiority is somehow permanent, decreed by God. As for blacks, if you look into the black civilizations that we're going to take a look at momentarily, you find something pretty interesting. You find that those civilizations actually arose as Jewish civilizations, later to become Islamic civilizations. Now, we live in a nation where blacks are taught that whitey got ahead by being a liar and a thief. So today's so-called black leaders get on the air and proclaim that the way to get ahead in America is for the black man to be a better liar and thief than whitey. I don't know about you, but I've thought about this matter, and there's no question in my mind as to where these so-called black leaders come from. They were put up there by whitey. Now, I'm not going to name any names. But the truth of the matter is that the roots of black greatness historically lay in Judaism and Islam. So the blacks who are teaching today that the answer to the question, how do you get ahead, is get the money, dollar bill, y'all. You folks know who I'm talking about, and that's what they teach. They don't want to hear any talk about God. For these people, the dollar bill, y'all crowd, the realization that black greatness in the past lay in roots which go into Judaism and Islam is not really what they want to hear. So they just ignore it. As for the blacks in this country who are not dollar bill, y'all people, we find that most of them are members of Christian churches, which is a good thing, except for the fact that they've been taught since childhood that Judaism and Islam are the enemy. And they've been taught that lesson so well that when they start to hear that the roots of black greatness historically lay in Islam, that's as far as they're going to go with that. They'll take slavery, thank you. So there you have it. Collusion. For whitey, it's great to keep black down. And for the blacks, it's great to not admit that in the past you were a Jew and later a Muslim. Now we're going to talk about the truths of history, the ignored truths. These truths are known to you if you're a black Muslim in America. You already know this if you're a black Muslim. But if you're a black treated in those whorehouses and condom vending machine buildings that we call public schools, then you probably don't know this. And if you're a white, you almost certainly don't know this. Let's talk a little bit about black history, and let's start with a map. This is a map of the area around the Mediterranean Sea. Up here we have Europe. Here's Africa. I think you can see on your screens that in this area of Africa that I'm pointing to is a desert. This, of course, is the Sahara Desert. The territory to the north is fertile, and the territory to the south is fertile. In fact, it's very fertile. Now let's talk about empires. The first great empire in Western civilization was probably Egypt, over here. Not much is known about the early Egyptian empire. There's lots of speculation. But in the process of time, the empire passed. Israel was great for a short time, but that didn't last either. Now, I don't have to tell you that a great empire arose in Greece. Most historians of intellectual Western history trace the history of Western intellectualism to Greece. Now, the Greek Empire didn't last too long, a number of centuries. One could reasonably ask why Greece became so great and why it was unable to hold on to its greatness. One could write whole books on that subject, and I'm sure that lots of such books have been written. But the fact of the matter is that for whatever reason, the Greek Empire rose, the Greek Empire fell. Subsequently, Western civilization moved over here to Italy. That's, of course, what we now call the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire at its peak stretched from Spain all the way around the Mediterranean, encompassing Arabia and parts of northern Africa. The Roman Empire lasted longer than just about any other, better part of 1,000 years, but in the process of time, Rome passed as well. There was a Persian Empire, which had its roots over here in Persia, actually over here, Iran. The Persian Empire at its peak stretched from Egypt, encompassing most of the Middle East, just about up to Greece. And the Persian Empire passed as well. The end of the Persian Empire came, I guess around the year 640 or so, when the armies of Muhammad began to conquer the Middle East, a process which was completed with lightning rapidity. So the next great empire was the Empire of Islam, an empire which, in many respects, has not ended to this day. It arose in Saudi Arabia, immediately conquered the entire Middle East, conquered Persia. The Persian Empire was Zoroastrian in religion. They got rid of that, replaced it with Islam. They tried desperately to get into Europe at this end and failed, but what they did do was they came across North Africa, and North Africa fell to the Muslims. It fell quickly, so that by the year 710, they were over here at the Straits of Gibraltar. That was only, about 60 years after the death of Muhammad. It took them only 60 years to conquer the entire Middle East and get over to this point right here. This puts us at the year 710 AD. Now, in the year 710 AD, a fellow by this name, let's get him to stand up a little better, Tarik ibn Ziyad, means Tariq, the son of Ziyad. Tarik was, I believe, a Moroccan. This is Morocco over here. In other words, he was a Moor, a man from Morocco. This whole North African empire, Islamic empire, came to be called the Moors, or in Shakespeare, the Blackamoors. Sounds like we had some black people there, huh? Tarik took the armies of Islam across the Straits of Gibraltar and landed on the Rock in the year 710 AD. You'll never guess what he did next. He burned the boats. He made up his mind that if his armies of Islam could not conquer Spain, they weren't going home. So he burned the damn boats, and that left them facing one way, which was straight forward. And in the year 710, they swept across the Iberian Peninsula, and they took the land that we now call Spain for Islam. For just about 800 years, until precisely the year 1492, the year Columbus sailed for America. For almost 800 years, Spain was a Muslim country. The army stopped at the Pyrenees Mountains because they couldn't beat the French. In honor of his conquest, they called what is now called the Rock of Gibraltar Jabal al-Tarik, which means the Mountain of Tarik. And the British, in their inimitable way, turned Jabal al-Tarik into Gibraltar. We now had an African Muslim empire which stretched from the Pyrenees Mountains, encompassing all of Spain, Morocco, and the whole north coast of Africa right up to Egypt, and the area south into the Sahara Desert as far as any man cared to stake a claim. This northern African empire, which was eventually headquartered in Spain, went under three names, and here they are. All the same empire, really, but three different names. From 710, the year that the Muslims moved into Spain, up until about the time of the Crusades, this was called the Umayyad Empire. And it wasn't just North Africa, because at that time, up until the Crusades, Islam had a world government. It was one empire, ruled from Damascus, and it was called the Umayyad Empire. But around the time of the Crusades, the Umayyad Empire fell apart into smaller empires. And the empire encompassing Spain and North Africa at that point was called the Almoravid Empire, later the Almohad Empire. These names, Almoravid and Almohad, come from names of tribes, but it was all basically the same region. This area, from Spain, North Africa, all the way to Egypt, and well into the Sahara Desert, an area just about the size of Western Europe. Now, around the time of the Crusades, Islam made its way across the Sahara Desert into this fertile sub-Saharan region, and a second Islamic empire arose down here. This empire also went under different names, and here are the names. Originally it was called Ghana, but not the Ghana of today. A huge mass of land, which we're going to show you again in a minute. Later it came to be called the Kingdom of Mali. And finally, at around the time of Columbus, it was called the Kingdom of Songhai. Songhai being the name of an African tribe which conquered the territory. 3 different names, but all really the same kingdom. A kingdom comprising the area from Senegal over here, all the way across the fertile sub-Saharan region to Chad, and well into the Sahara Desert. Again, an area almost the size of Western Europe. Now, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but I'm pointing now to a river. This river flows from the mountains coming originally from Senegal, first east and then south. It's called the Niger River. And along the shores of the Niger River arose a civilization which eventually became the center of civilization in the Western world. Its headquarters was here. This is a city called Timbuktu. To those of you who are not familiar with this history, it might sound a little like a joke. Timbuktu. Timbuktu, at the time that Columbus sailed for America, was the center of Western civilization. Right here in the heart of Africa, on the shores of the Niger River. In other words, this was a city of niggers, some people would like to call them. But they outdid Whitey. Europe at this time was a mess. There was no real civilization to speak of. The Renaissance was just starting at the time that Timbuktu, down in the heart of so-called darkest Africa, was the center of world civilization. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? Not only is it possible, it was true. And if you don't believe it, look it up in any encyclopedia. It's straight enough to get away with this. Is cult facts of history. Involves would just as soon not think about it. Now, before proceeding, I want to show you a few books. This book is called From Babylon to Timbuktu, written by Rudolph Windsor. I've spoken to Rudolph Windsor a few times. He's a great writer, and he takes the history of the sub-Saharan black empires as well as the northern Saharan black empires and makes them very readable. All the information in this book can be verified in any encyclopedia, but it's more interesting to read it here. Because Mr. Windsor is a sponsor of this show, we're going to be giving the address of his publishing company at the end. You can also obtain this book in many black bookstores or street stalls which cater to black books, although you won't necessarily be able to find this in Barnes & Noble. Great book. Here's another book which is a big source of information for me. It's called World's Great Men of Color. And this is a book you shouldn't have too much trouble finding in a library or elsewhere. It was written by J.A. Rogers, one of the great black writers of the early 20th century. Finally, here's a book that I'd love to be able to talk about, but I doubt there'll be time. It's called The Sign and the Seal by Graham Hancock. It was a bestseller for its genre not too long ago. It tells the story of the Ark of the Covenant. And if you're like me, by the time you finish this book, you're going to believe, as the author believes, that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia, where it's been for thousands of years. That is, God, if Mr. Hancock is correct, gave the Ark of the Covenant to niggers. Think about that. Of course, a lot of people don't believe that. I'm not 100% sure it's true myself, but I'm about 90% convinced. In any event, I don't think we're going to have time to talk about the Ark today. Let's talk about Spain during the Middle Ages. I want to read something to you. I want to read you a little passage about Moorish Spain as Europe's cultural center. Although the white Christians of Spain deeply desired during this entire period to expel the blackamoors from their country, it is nevertheless an undisputed historical fact that medieval Spain was the cultural, educational, and scientific center of Europe. The Moorish kings lived in castles of highly polished marble, with elaborately carved walls and beautiful mosaic floors, while European kings lived in cold, damp castles of unfinished stone, crude by comparison. The streets of Spain's capital city, Córdoba, were well paved and completely illuminated by public lights, at a time when the streets of London were dark and covered with mud. The Moors possessed all the knowledge of ancient Greece, which was lost to Europe until the Renaissance. They made important contributions to philosophy, medicine, mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, and botany. Doesn't sound like such a dark age after all, does it? There were academies for the rich, free schools for the poor, and libraries containing books from all over the world. The Jews of medieval Spain got along famously with the Muslims, and for them the sojourn in that nation is remembered as being the second most glorious period in their history, exceeded only by the glory of the reigns of David and Solomon in ancient Israel. Medieval Spain was the time and place of Maimonides and many of the other great Old Testament scholars, whose works constitute the foundations of modern Jewish thought. Throughout the Middle Ages, the white Christians of Spain endeavored to thrust out the Moors. It took them until 1492 to do that. When Isabella and Ferdinand finally defeated the last Moorish king in Granada, in the same year that they financed Columbus's trip to America, they immediately expelled all Jews who refused to accept Christianity. This is not at all surprising. Since the Jews had actively supported the Moorish conquests, the Christians were not about to take any chances on losing what had taken them 800 years to regain. The day the last Moors and Jews were expelled from Spain was counted as a great day in Spanish history. But was it? It's true that Spain, largely through the strength of its navy, had achieved the status of a world power. But in less than a century, the Spanish Armada was defeated by England, and the nation went into a great decline. Now we're going to ask a very important question. During the Middle Ages, were Spain's Muslim rulers really black? It's almost inevitable that white people who have never been taught black history will ask this question. Were they really black? After all, Moors are kind of Arabic. They're not really Negro, are they? And the answer to the question is that there was more than one race involved. Again, as I told you before, in the beginning there was the Umayyad dynasty, and they were mainly Arabic, although there were some blacks there. But by about the time of the Crusades, the Umayyad dynasty became soft and complacent, and the forces of Christianity were rising up in Spain and threatening to overthrow Islam. A second dynasty of kings arose called the Almoravids. They came out of Senegal, which is right in the middle of Africa. That's about as black as you can get. They conquered Spain, and they were the rulers from then until the end. Centuries. There's no question that Spain was ruled by blacks, at least during the latter part of the Middle Ages. The third dynasty, the Almohads, was also a mixed dynasty. The greatest of the Almohad kings was a fellow who they called Al-Mansur, which means the Invincible. His actual name was Yaqub ibn Yusuf, which means Jacob, son of Joseph. Almost like a Jewish name. Al-Mansur arose at a time when the Christian forces were really rearing up and threatening to expel Islam. The Christians put together a huge army of 300,000 men at a place called Alarcos. Al-Mansur called together all the forces of Islam from all across North Africa, all the way to Egypt, and put together an army which beat the Christians at Al-Alarcos in one of the greatest battles in history. Now, Al-Mansur was the son of a man who was described as being of mixed race, but his mother was a full-blooded Negro slave from Senegal or Timbuktu. That makes Al-Mansur at least 75% Negro. And that's about as colored as any black man walking the streets of America today. So the answer to the question is yes, Spain was ruled by blacks during the period when it was indisputably the cultural, scientific, and educational center of Europe, believe it or not. Now the slightly out of focus map on the left-hand side of your screen shows the approximate boundaries of the medieval Great Black Sub-Saharan Kingdom, known variously as Ghana and then Mali and later Songhai, all the same kingdom, a rather large kingdom. The yellow color shows the modern nation of Mali, which is of course much smaller. And right in the midst of it is a large black arrow showing the location of Timbuktu, the greatest city of that nation. I'd like to read you something about Timbuktu. This kingdom was originally called the Kingdom of Ghana. From about 300 AD up to the time of the Crusades, Ghana was a Jewish nation. This has been documented by the writings of one Eldad the Danite, whose works constitute the main historical source of information for this time or place. So this was a Jewish kingdom. Did you know that there were Jewish kingdoms in Africa? After North Africa was converted to Islam, an immensely lucrative trade developed between Ghana and the Islamic states to the north. In other words, the empire that was centered in Spain, which we talked about. At first, the Ghanans traded gold, then iron, which was used to make weapons. Eventually, they traded grain, which proved to be the most lucrative of all. Shortly after the year 1000 AD, the kings of Ghana converted to Islam. Subsequently, the city of Timbuktu became the center of trade for the entire world, not just Africa. At that time in history, movement of goods across Europe from land was out of the question, because Europe was a collection of warring, barbarian states. So all goods from the East, and that means all goods period, because there weren't nothing being made in the West at that time, all goods from the East were brought to Egypt, where they were loaded onto caravans. The caravan routes all converged at Timbuktu, which, by the 15th century, had become one of the wealthiest cities in the world. From Timbuktu, the goods were transported 1,000 miles to the Atlantic coast, from where they were loaded onto ships bound for Europe. In the 14th century, the University of Sankore was founded at Timbuktu, and this city began to become one of the world's leading centers of academic learning. Ghana, which by then was known as Songhai, came to be known as the Mecca of the Sudan. By the year 1500, this empire in the heart of so-called darkest Africa had become the center of the Islamic world, at a time when the Renaissance in Europe had barely begun. The students of Timbuktu were sent out to the great Muslim universities of Spain, North Africa, and Asia, and the learned men of all races and nationalities were paid handsomely to come into Timbuktu to teach. The commodity which came to be the most profitable object of trade in Timbuktu was not gold or silver or grain, but books. It has been written that there were more books in the library of the University of Sankore than in all the libraries of Europe combined. It is also said that the entire body of male free citizens was literate. Leadership and authority were in hands of the learned scholars of the city. There was a legendary 14th century Muslim traveler named Ibn Battuta. He's kind of like the Marco Polo of the Arab world. And this is what Ibn Battuta had to say about Timbuktu, and I quote, "The inhabitants had a greater abhorrence of injustice than any other people. Neither the man who travels nor he who stays at home has anything to fear from robbers or men of violence." The driving force behind these developments was God and nothing else. Timbuktu arose as a Jewish empire and blossomed under the banners of Islam. There's no question about what the source of greatness was, not black skin color, but God. So maybe you're starting to understand what I mean when I say, whoever you thought you were, you're a Jew. We're out of time now. Please tune in next week when we're going to talk about the relationship between God and enlightenment. Are there two different ultimate realities, or are these two the same? Or maybe they're both wrong. If you want to know the answer to the question, tune in next week and find out. Thank you, and goodbye.
You must redo it. No one's going to give it to you. You must reclaim it. And if you don't reclaim it, logically someone who's living off your virtues is not going to say, well, this is what you do. And you shouldn't expect it. Not that it wouldn't be morally correct or ethically correct. It would be, could be. But since they're colonists have a mission, don't they? And I think the mission of a colonist is that with your leeches in dirty water, a colonist is in the political arena. His mission is to suck your essence. Why? That's where they get their nourishment from. We call it slavery. Scientists call it bloodsucking. Essence draining. Do you understand? So, what are we talking about fixing it? So, we have a covenant with Allah, with nature herself, that we have violated. Part of it is that we have agreed to the papal principles of disrespect for womanhood. The one who brings us all here. And that includes us, not a man thing. That's women have disrespected their role in society. Not what he said their role is, what they know their role is in nature. That is what the corporate state will assure, if they have any hand in it, that the children will be. And so if they have the woman in servitude, the children are slaves. That's why it's important that they file that birth certificate in the county record under corporate auspices so they can place their debt and debts in the world against that bond. But then, for the return of service under feudal law, the nomen, which is a phonicism that's on there, refers to what you think is a person because it sounds like their name, but it is not their name. It is back to the man of straw that they created, just like you create a corporation. It's a fiction. But then when they call the debt, they go and get the body that they claim is attached to it, and when the body does not rebuke it, the bond carries as law. Then they sue you.
Islam Taj. Could you elaborate for the sake of those of us here who are probably not familiar with how, when we go down and we get married in front of this
unite them, it is a contract with the corporation that all issue from the womb of the mother automatically becomes ward, W-A-R-D, write that down, look it up in the law book, of the state. Wards of the state, which is a nice way of saying dependent slave of the state. It's because they say slave, then you get pissed and you want to fight.
military.
So they just say ward of the state and you're happy, because you don't read anyway. And so, you know, that's how they take it. So they already know we're not going to, most of us, not going to figure it out. And so the wardship status and the filing goes on while we process every day and we're busy sporting and playing. And they're filing liens against us constantly. Which, of course, you know, is why under auspices, because they have debts against these certificates on these living beings that are listed as chattel. That's why they will get you if you hit their property. They come in the middle of the night, kick your door down and take their property out. And you can tell them, they're my children. Corporate, don't even list them as, that's their corporate property. And usually has their name on it. And you have no standing in law to make any argument. However, we're usually looking at it from a moral and ethical position, like there really are, like we've been ethical, as if we've honored our mothers and fathers.
Agent of the state, how we have signed over ourselves and all of our progeny to the state.
And see, and this is the deal, is while you have done it, it is unclean. Because it's not conscious that you do it. Now, and this is, and when you see the sister or brother, make sure they know this. The marriage certificate, particularly in the corporate state of New Jersey, and it would be likewise in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the other corporate states, though they may use different title numbers, comes absolutely, in every respect, absolutely under police powers, Title 37. All right? Now, the state agent's job, which is an overseer, is to convince the slaves that he was sent from God, the Creator God, to bring them together in holy union. The people don't know that they're operating for the Holy Roman Empire, who ordained them, all right, and gives them a fee for keeping the niggers from getting restless, which is designated European family property, all right? And when they, that is to nourish, nurture, cultivate civilization with knowledge, not with emotions. However, she lost knowledge because we've been held to servitude. So therefore, it is responsible for us to do what? To seek knowledge. And to embrace knowledge, not to fear knowledge. And to apply the wisdom that it brings. To do what? To build. Because when you build with things that are solid and not illusionary, they have a tendency to stay longer, don't they? I think so. Are you following me? Now with the sister, with the child, not understanding that birth certificates are bonds, and most people not knowing that they are, usually will approach them with a position of a sense of security or civic duty that, oh, I filed the papers and cool. You know, and it's on file, like it's on file for the record. Not knowing that it's on file for bond against the child and the mother. Because the condition, politically, the condition of the children are the condition of the mother, according to the Christian black codes. And so, irregardless of the condition or the status of the father, the condition of the mother is considered first. All right? So whatever her status is politically,